Jax groaned as the Zorathian guards dragged him through the sleek, metallic corridors of their flagship. His wrists were bound in glowing energy cuffs, but his mouth, as always, remained free. "You know," he said, glancing at the stoic alien on his left, "these cuffs are a bit tight. You guys ever heard of customer service? Maybe a loyalty program? 10th capture gets you a free meal?" The guard ignored him, his expression as unreadable as the rest of his species. Jax sighed. "Tough crowd. Guess comedy isn't universal." They reached a massive door, which slid open with a hiss. Inside, a tall, imposing Zorathian woman stood with her back to them, her silver robes shimmering under the cold light. The guards shoved Jax forward, and he stumbled, catching himself with a grin. "Nice place you've got here. Very shiny. Do you do interior decorating on the side, or is this a full-time dictator gig?" The woman turned, her piercing blue eyes locking onto his. Her face was flawless, her features sharp and regal, but her expression was colder than deep space. "You are Jax," she said, her voice smooth but devoid of warmth. "A human smuggler. A nuisance. Guilty as charged," Jax said, bowing dramatically. "But I prefer the term intergalactic entrepreneur. Smuggler sounds so illegal." She stepped closer, her gaze narrowing. "You were caught transporting contraband through Zorathian space. Do you deny it?" "Contraband?" Jax feigned offense. "Those were cultural artifacts. Very fragile. I was just relocating them. For preservation purposes." Her lips twitched, but not in amusement. "Your lies are as primitive as your species." "Ouch," Jax said, clutching his chest. "And here I thought we were bonding." She ignored him, turning to the guards. "Leave us." The guards hesitated. "My lady, he's dangerous." She raised an eyebrow. "He's a human. What harm could he possibly do?" The guards exchanged glances but obeyed, leaving Jax alone with her. He smirked. "So, it's just you and me, huh? Should I be flattered or terrified?" She stepped closer, her eyes scanning him like he was a specimen under a microscope. "You will answer my questions, human. If you cooperate, your punishment may be less severe." "Punishment?" Jax said, leaning against the wall. "I was hoping for a reward. Maybe a medal for most charming prisoner." Her expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes, a faint tremor in her hands. She clenched them into fists, but the trembling didn't stop. Jax noticed immediately. "Whoa, you okay there? You're shaking like a leaf in a solar storm. Did I scare you? Or is this just your way of saying I'm electrifying?" She took a step back, her composure slipping for the first time. "Silence!" Jax raised an eyebrow. "Hey, no need to get defensive. I'm just saying if you're cold, I've got a jacket." "Well, not right now since you took it, but—" "Enough!" she snapped, but her voice wavered. She turned away, her shoulders tense. "This is unacceptable." Jax tilted his head, studying her. "You know, for someone who's supposed to be interrogating me, you're not doing a great job of hiding your nerves. What's the deal? Am I really that intimidating?" She didn't answer, but the trembling grew worse. Jax frowned. "Okay, seriously, are you sick or something? Because if this is some kind of alien flu, I'd rather not catch it. My immune system's not exactly galaxy-proof." She spun around, her eyes blazing. "You will not speak of this." "Speak of what?" Jax said, holding up his hands. "I'm just trying to help. You're the one shaking like a malfunctioning droid." She took a deep breath, visibly struggling to regain control. "Guards!" The doors slid open, and the guards rushed in. "My lady? Take him to the holding cell," she said, her voice steadier now. "And ensure he is properly secured." The guards grabbed Jax, dragging him toward the door. He glanced over his shoulder, a smirk playing on his lips. "Hey, if you change your mind about that jacket, let me know. I'm great at sharing." The doors closed behind him, leaving her alone in the room. She stared at her hands, which were still trembling. "What is wrong with me?" she muttered. Meanwhile, Jax was being marched down the corridor, his mind racing. "So," he said to the guards, "what's her deal? She always that jumpy, or is it just me?" The guards didn't answer, but Jax didn't need them to. He had a feeling he'd stumbled onto something big, and if there was one thing Jax loved, it was turning the tables. Lady Vera stood in the council chamber, her hands clasped tightly behind her back to hide the trembling that hadn't stopped since her encounter with the human. The room was filled with the most powerful Zorathians in the Empire, their cold, calculating eyes fixed on her. She hated this. She hated him. "Lady Vera," one of the council members began, his voice dripping with condescension, "we've received reports of unusual behavior from you. Care to explain?" She straightened, forcing her voice to remain steady. "I assure you, there is nothing unusual about my behavior. The human prisoner is difficult. That is all." Another council member leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "Difficult? We've seen the footage. You were trembling in his presence." "Trembling, Lady Vera? Zorathians do not tremble." She clenched her jaw. "It was a momentary lapse. The human's primitive behavior is unsettling." "Unsettling?" the first council member repeated, his tone skeptical. "A single human unsettles you? Perhaps you're not as strong as we thought." Lady Vera's fists tightened behind her back. "I am perfectly capable of handling this situation. The human will be dealt with." "See that he is," the second council member said. "And if you cannot control yourself, we will find someone who can." The dismissal in his tone was clear. Lady Vera gave a curt nod and turned on her heel, striding out of the chamber before her trembling became too obvious. As soon as the doors closed behind her, she let out a frustrated breath. This was unacceptable. She needed answers. Meanwhile, Jax was lounging in his cell, his feet propped up on the bench as he hummed a tune. The guards had given him a blanket and a tray of food after his negotiation with Lady Vera, and he was making the most of it. "Not bad," he said, popping a piece of alien fruit into his mouth. "A little bland, but hey, free room and board. Can't complain." The door slid open, and Lady Vera stepped inside, her expression as cold as ever. Jax grinned. "Back so soon? Miss me already?" She ignored him, turning to the guards. "Leave us." The guards hesitated. "My lady." "I said leave us," she snapped, her voice sharp enough to make them flinch. They obeyed, closing the door behind them. Jax raised an eyebrow. "Wow. Someone's in a mood. Bad day at the office?" She stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. "What are you?" Jax blinked. Human? Last time I checked." "Do not play games with me," she said, her voice low. "What are you doing to me?" Jax tilted his head, feigning confusion. "Doing to you? Lady, I've been locked in this cell since we last met. Unless my charm is so powerful it works through walls, I'm not doing anything." Her hands trembled again, and she clenched them into fists. "You are lying." Jax leaned forward, his smirk fading. "Look, I don't know what's going on with you, but it's not me. Maybe you're just stressed? Overworked? Ever thought about taking a vacation?" She glared at him. "Zorathians do not get stressed. We are above such primitive weaknesses." "Right," Jax said, nodding. "Because trembling like a leaf is totally normal for your species." "My bad." She took a deep breath, clearly struggling to maintain her composure. "If you do not tell me the truth, I will have you executed." Jax held up his hands. Whoa, let's not jump to executions here. I'm just a guy trying to make a living. If I knew what was going on, I'd tell you. But I don't. So, unless you've got some kind of human allergy, I'm as clueless as you are." She stared at him for a long moment, then turned and pressed a button on the wall. A holographic screen appeared, displaying a Zorathian scientist in a lab coat. "My lady," the scientist said, bowing slightly. "Run a full scan on the human," Lady Vera ordered. "I want to know everything about him, His biology, his scent, everything. The scientist nodded. At once, my lady. Jax raised an eyebrow. My scent? Okay, now I'm flattered. Didn't realize I was your type. She ignored him, turning back to the screen. And keep this confidential. If the council finds out. Understood, the scientist said, cutting her off. The screen disappeared, and Lady Vera turned back to Jax, her expression unreadable. Well, Jax said, leaning back against the wall, this is getting interesting. So, what's the plan? You gonna dissect me? Run some experiments? Maybe write a paper on the irresistible human? She didn't answer, but the trembling in her hands grew worse. Jax frowned. You know, if you keep shaking like that, people are gonna start talking. Just saying. She turned and strode out of the cell without another word, leaving Jax alone. He stared at the closed door, a slow grin spreading across his face. Well, he muttered. Looks like I've got a fan. Jax sat cross-legged on the floor of his cell, tossing a piece of alien fruit into the air and catching it with ease. The door slid open, and the Zorathian scientist from the hologram stepped inside, flanked by 2 guards. Jax raised an eyebrow. Hey, Doc. Come to take me to your leader? Or just here to poke me with sharp objects? The scientist ignored the jab, holding up a small device. Remain still. This will only take a moment. Jax shrugged. Sure, why not? Not like I've got anywhere to be. The scientist scanned him with the device, his expression growing more puzzled by the second. Jax smirked. Find anything interesting? Maybe a hidden talent? I've always thought I'd make a great dancer. The scientist didn't respond, finishing the scan and stepping back. Fascinating. That's what they all say, Jax said, grinning. So, what's the verdict? Am I a medical marvel or just really good-looking? The scientist hesitated, glancing at the guards. Leave us. The guards obeyed, closing the door behind them. Jax leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. Okay, now you've got my attention. What's the big secret? The scientist adjusted his glasses, his tone clinical. Your species emits a unique combination of pheromones. To Zorathians, they are intoxicating. Jax blinked. Wait, what? You're saying I'm like space cologne? In a manner of speaking, the scientist said. The effect is particularly strong on Lady Vera. It appears to be causing her physical reactions. Jax stared at him for a moment, then burst out laughing. You're kidding. She's trembling because of my smell? That's the funniest thing I've heard all week. The scientist frowned. This is no laughing matter. The implications are significant. If the council were to discover. Yeah, big scandal, blah blah, Jax said, waving a hand. But let's be real here, this is the best thing that's ever happened to me. I mean, who needs weapons when you've got natural charm? The scientist sighed. You do not understand the gravity of the situation. Oh, I understand, Jax said, leaning back with a grin. I'm basically a walking weapon of mass distraction. This changes everything. The scientist opened his mouth to respond, but the door slid open again, and Lady Vera stepped inside. Her expression was as cold as ever, but the faint trembling in her hands betrayed her. Leave us, she said to the scientist. He hesitated. My lady, I must advise against. Leave, she repeated, her tone leaving no room for argument. The scientist bowed and exited the cell, leaving Jax alone with Lady Vera. Jax smirked. So, heard I'm irresistible. Guess that explains why you can't stay away, huh? She ignored him, stepping closer. You will tell no one of this. Tell no one? Jax said, feigning offense. And miss out on the best story of my life? Not a chance. Her eyes narrowed. If you value your life, you will keep this to yourself. Jax held up his hands. Hey, no need to get all threatening. I'm just saying, this is kind of a big deal. I mean, who knew humans had superpowers, right? She took a deep breath, clearly struggling to maintain her composure. This effect you have on me. It is unacceptable. Unacceptable? Jack said, raising an eyebrow. Seems to me like it's just biology. Can't fight nature, right? She glared at him. You will not speak of this again. Jax leaned forward, his grin widening. Or what? You'll tremble at me some more? Her hands clenched into fists, but the trembling only grew worse. Jax's expression softened slightly. Look, I get it. This is weird for both of us. But maybe instead of fighting it we could… I don't know, use it to our advantage? She stared at him, her eyes narrowing. What are you suggesting? Jack shrugged. I'm just saying, you've got a problem, and I've got a solution. Maybe we can help each other out. She didn't respond, but the tension in her shoulders eased slightly. Jax took that as a good sign. Think about it. You scratch my back, I scratch yours. Metaphorically speaking, of course. She turned away, her voice low. I will consider it. Jax grinned. That's all I ask? She strode out of the cell without another word, leaving Jax alone. He leaned back against the wall, a slow smile spreading across his face. Well, he muttered. Looks like I've got a bargaining chip. Jax leaned against the wall of his cell, whistling a tune as he waited. The door slid open, and Lady Vera stepped inside, her expression as unreadable as ever. Jax grinned. Back again? You're really making this cell feel like home. She ignored him, pressing a button on the wall. The energy cuffs around his wrists deactivated, and Jax rubbed his wrists dramatically. Finally. Those things were starting to chafe. So, what's the plan? You letting me go, or are we finally going on that date? She turned to him, her voice cold. You will accompany me to the council chamber. You will say nothing unless I instruct you to. Do you understand? Jax raised an eyebrow. Accompany you? Sounds like a date to me. But sure, I'll play along. What's in it for me? Her eyes narrowed. Your freedom. If you cooperate. Jax smirked. Freedom, huh? Tempting. But what if I want more? She stepped closer, her voice low. Do not push your luck, human. Jax held up his hands. Okay. Freedom it is. Lead the way, your highness. She turned and strode out of the cell, Jax following close behind. The guards fell into step around them, their expressions wary. Jax glanced at one of them. So, you guys ever get tired of the whole stoic enforcer thing? Ever thought about, I don't know, cracking a smile? The guard ignored him, and Jax sighed. Tough crowd. They reached the council chamber, the doors sliding open to reveal the imposing figures of the Zorathian council. Lady Vera stepped forward, her voice steady. Council members, I bring before you the human prisoner, Jax. The council members turned their cold gazes on Jax, who gave a mock bow. Hey there. Nice place you've got. Very authoritarian. One of the council members leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. Why have you brought him here, Lady Vera? She took a deep breath. I have discovered that the human possesses a unique ability. One that could be of use to us. Jax raised an eyebrow but stayed silent, as instructed. The council members exchanged glances. Explain, one of them said. Lady Vera hesitated, then spoke. The human emits pheromones that have a calming effect on our species. I believe we can use this to our advantage in negotiations with other races. Jax barely managed to suppress a laugh. Calming effect? That was one way to put it. The council members murmured among themselves, their expressions skeptical. And how do you propose we use this ability? One of them asked. Lady Vera straightened. By presenting the human as a diplomatic asset. His presence could help us secure alliances and avoid conflict. Jax couldn't resist. So, what you're saying is, I'm basically a walking peace treaty. Cool. Always wanted to be a diplomat. Lady Vera shot him a warning look, but the damage was done. The council members turned their attention to Jax, their expressions unreadable. Is this true? One of them asked. Jax shrugged. Hey, if she says so. I'm just here for the free food. The council members exchanged glances again, then one of them stood. Very well. We will consider this proposal. In the meantime, the human will remain under guard. Lady Vera nodded. Understood. As the council members began to disperse, Jax leaned closer to Lady Vera. So, that went well. Think they bought it? She didn't respond, her expression tense. Jax sighed. You know, for someone who's supposed to be a master negotiator, you're not great at lying. She turned to him, her voice low. This is not a game, human. If the council discovers the truth. Yeah, big trouble, Jax said, waving a hand. But hey, we're in this together now, right? So, what's next? She hesitated, then spoke. You will accompany me to a meeting with the Krylos delegation. Your presence will ensure their cooperation. Jax grinned. So, I'm your secret weapon now? I like it. But just so you know, I don't come cheap. She glared at him. Do not test my patience. Jax held up his hands. Okay. No testing. Got it. They left the council chamber, the guards falling into step behind them. Jax glanced at Lady Vera, his expression softening slightly. You know, for what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. She didn't respond, but the tension in her shoulders eased slightly. Jax took that as a win.